Indeed, we had Honda reporting after markets close, and we just saw the market reaction there from the company, lower by about 1.5% or so. Certainly, this is a household name, number 2 biggest automaker after Toyota in Japan, known for its motorcycles, its Civic, CRVs and so forth. And we've been watching for what was the tariff impact in those 3 months. So this is the April-June quarter. And the company saying that it was a hit of 125 billion yen or $846 million. And that's due solely to these US levies, keeping in mind for most of those 3 months, they were paying that 27.5% rate. And when you look across the automakers that have been reporting in the US, Europe, and indeed in Japan as well, this is one of the biggest hits in terms of US tariff impact. The translation here for the quarter is that operating profit dropped by nearly 50% on year here and was a big miss as well against analyst forecasts. $1.66 billion is the operating profit number there. And that was mostly, if you look under the hood there, coming through because you saw the autos actually dropping into a loss, operating profit loss, but motorcycles making up for a lot of that. This is an ongoing strength here for the company, particularly in Latin America, also in markets like Vietnam in terms of those sales as well. Now, the company is saying that going ahead in terms of the tariff impact, and Marty, you noted this, we saw that there was a revision to the upside in terms of this year's full year forecast, and that is because of the assumption that the 15% tariff rather than the 27.5 will take effect. That knocked off 200 billion yen in terms of the projections of the tariff impact. And now the company is saying that for the full year, they're talking about a 450 billion yen impact as well. And of course, we will be getting Toyota's numbers at about 1 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. That's 2 p.m. local time in Japan as well, with analysts expecting a fall there in terms of operating profit and the weakest quarterly result in 2 years. I just want to bring in Kaori now in Tokyo, our Japan correspondent. Kaori, you've been monitoring what Ryosei Akazawa, the chief trade negotiator, has been doing over the last few months. He's back in Washington, and I understand he's also met with Howard Lutnick. But has there been any update on when we will see the implementation of this lower auto tariff?
Yeah, good morning, Ling. The short answer is no. Japan is very, very nervous that the agreement that they supposedly inked 2 weeks ago, and Akazawa-san said, look, mission accomplished, is actually really a fait accompli, because that's why he's back in Washington for the 9th time. He did meet with Lutnick for 90 minutes, we're told, but he wants to make sure of 2 things. Now, in about, 15 hours' time, the expectation was that the tariffs on the auto sector and auto parts would go down to 15% from the 27.5% now. But he wants to go home, leave Washington with a signed piece of paper in hand that this is actually happening and when it's happening. So I think there is a lot of uncertainty here in Japan and a lot of fear that is this really happening on the day that Japan said? I mean, 2 weeks ago, we talked about this, the discrepancies and the sort of mismatch between the communications that we're getting from both sides was fairly clear. The other thing that people are worried about, I think, is the guidance from customs that we got earlier on this week. And in that, they said, look, they explicitly mentioned the EU, which inked the 15% deal after just a few days after Japan. And they explicitly marked a special provision that would limit the impact of reciprocal tariffs. So Akazawa-san likes to call this stacking, so no stacking. So they're worried that Japan was not part of this, mentioned as part of this. But Akazawa-san also said, in Washington that, look, when Japan agreed with the UK, it took them 54 days to take effect. So, bear with us. Maybe we need a little bit of patience. But I think for the auto sector, patience is really a very rare commodity. And actually, when you mentioned Toyota, Lynn, I didn't know this till recently, but apparently Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and Akio Toyoda, the scion of Toyota, went to school together. They went to high school. and to college together. So, and they got together early this month, and Akio said, look, use Toyota if you need to use us for these trade negotiations. Look, we'll reverse imports the cars that we made for the US. So that's a little bit of trivia for you this morning.
Fascinating stuff. I didn't know about that personal relationship that the two of them had there. I wanted to pick up on the point in terms of the concerns around stacking, because just in the last couple of minutes, Asahi newspaper is now reporting that the US will add 15% on all Japanese imports and that the US will not apply exceptions to Japan for products that already have tariffs exceeding 15%. So to me, that sounds like that the exemption that they thought that they had along with the EU, they don't have.
This is a bombshell, if true, because this means that we're back to square one. And I think this is going to be a huge point of contention. And could potentially impact that huge $550 billion investment that Japan pledged in exchange for these other agreements. Because this no stacking rule that Akazawa keeps talking about. So basically, for example, Wagyu, which is Japanese beef, like Kobe beef, right? The tariff right now was 26.4%. They tacked on 10% on top of that, so it's now 36.4%. So if the tariffs exceeding 15% now are going to be slapped with a new 15% tariffs. That's tariffs of over 50%. I mean, a lot of these industries will never be able to survive this. So I think if this is the case, we're back to square one. And gosh, I think everyone's going to be waiting for that conversation with Akazawa, if he gets it, with Besant, because he's the one that he needs to talk to right now.